This offseason has been very eventful for almost every team in the NBA, but when I say that, I don't necessarily mean it in a positive way for every instance. A lot of teams did get better this summer, that's true, but even the teams that succeeded in doing so have messed up at least somewhere along the way, and no team ever really pulls off a perfect offseason. So this brings us to the topic of today's video. I started this topic in my last video, so today will be the conclusion and continuation of the discussion, but basically we'll be going through every team in the NBA, identifying their biggest L of the offseason, meaning we'll be talking about the one thing that hurt them the most this summer going into the new year. Last video we covered the teams in the Eastern Conference, so today we'll be running through the teams in the Western Conference. Before we start though, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, as not only does it help out a ton, but I would also very much appreciate it. Now with that being said, let's begin. Going in alphabetical order by city, we'll start with the Dallas Mavericks, and their biggest L of the offseason is failing to find Luka Doncic a legit number 2 guy. The Mavericks season ended at the hands of the Los Angeles Clippers in the playoffs in what was a very winnable series for them, and if there was one takeaway everyone had, it was that Luka is ready to compete at the highest level. He did everything he could that series, but the same cannot be said for Kristaps Porzingis, who struggled mightily. Porzingis was brought in to be Luka's star sidekick, but when it's mattered, he hasn't really held up his end of the bargain. Many thought the team would look to move Porzingis to free up some cash or to pursue better options in the future, but that just never happened. Next up is the Denver Nuggets, and their biggest L of the offseason was just the fact that they didn't really do anything notable. I know this is a lazy answer, but most of their moves were just re-signing their own guys who were free agents, and fringe moves like signing Jeff Green. They got a good player in the draft for the value in Bones Hyland, they have a very similar team coming back that they had a year ago, and they should once again be good, but it's hard to tell if they actually improved. With Jamal Murray still injured and set to miss a large chunk of next season, they felt comfortable with running it back with what they had alongside MVP winner Nikola Jokic, but they're probably not quite in title contention status because of it. Next up is the Golden State Warriors, and again, this is another team that really didn't make any glaring mistakes, but if I had to pick something, it would be that they never found a trade deal for their 2 lottery picks. Rumors were swirling before the draft about how the Warriors were looking to move their draft capital in order to acquire a win-now type player to help them get back into the playoffs after missing it for 2 seasons in a row, and that trade never happened. They did nail the draft with those 2 picks though, but relying on young players to contribute immediately for contending teams is always a tall order. Up next we have the Houston Rockets, and their biggest L of the offseason is the signing of Daniel Theis. This is another example of a tanking team signing a role player that would be valuable in the rotation of a playoff team for no other reason than to eat away at the minutes of younger talent that needs that development. It's confusing on paper, and while he could end up being moved at the trade deadline, it's still their weakest move of the summer so far for a team that has done well for itself otherwise. Next up is the Los Angeles Clippers, and their biggest L of the offseason was acquiring Eric Bledsoe. Bledsoe has been regressing quite a bit over the last few seasons as a player, and his fit alongside the Clippers' core is incredibly questionable as is. For the team to trade away both Rajon Rondo and Patrick Beverley for him seems kind of absurd to me, because Bledsoe isn't necessarily a great passer or playmaker, he's inefficient as a shooter, and while he's good defensively, Beverley is probably better in that regard. I'm very down on this move personally and would rank it as one of the worst any team made this summer. Next up is the Los Angeles Lakers, and their biggest L of the offseason is sacrificing so much of their perimeter defense. Now, the Lakers certainly had a great offseason, filled with signings that should improve the team overall, but it goes without saying that the team's number 1 ranked defense from a season ago took a hit as a result of some of these moves. The Lakers had an offensive-minded revamping of the roster this offseason, and with Alex Caruso and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope gone, I'm not quite sure anyone they brought in can match their energy on the defensive end. I wouldn't worry too much about this obviously because offensively the team improved a ton, but just don't expect them to be a top-ranked defense like they were last year either. Next up is the Memphis Grizzlies, and their biggest L of the offseason is purposely shifting away from the present for the future. For 2 seasons in a row now, the Grizzlies have overachieved by being in the playoff hunt, with last year actually resulting in a playoff appearance, so for them to now intentionally trade away some of their best guys, such as Jonas Valanciunas and Grayson Allen, for more future-oriented pieces will kill all momentum that they've built. Playoff experience is always important for young and up-and-coming teams, and after this offseason, I definitely think they'll get passed up in a tough Western Conference. Up next, we have the Minnesota Timberwolves, and again, it's going to sound like a lazy answer, but the answer for them in this category is that they just didn't do anything significant all summer. The Wolves were one of the worst teams in the league last year, and with Karl Anthony Towns entering his prime, the franchise still doesn't seem to have any urgency to maximize his best years as a player. They added players like Taurean Prince and Patrick Beverley, who are fine rotation guys, but not needle movers, and it's hard not to see them once again finishing with one of the worst records in the league for this upcoming season. Next up is the New Orleans Pelicans, and their biggest L of the offseason is losing Lonzo Ball and failing to successfully replace him. The Pelicans allowed Lonzo Ball to leave to go to the Chicago Bulls this summer, and according to reports, they did so in hopes of landing Kyle Lowry in free agency to replace him. Well, they didn't land Kyle Lowry, so now they've downgraded at the point guard position and are trending in the wrong direction. Up next, we have the Oklahoma City Thunder, and their biggest L of the offseason is the way that they handled acquiring Kemba Walker. Sam Presti did what he's become known for by acquiring a first-round pick with Walker when that trade happened. Then the team bought Kemba Walker's contract out. The first-rounder was the 16th pick in this year's draft, which is pretty good value, but then they flipped that pick for 2 future picks that are both heavily protected, so in the end, they could very well come away with nothing of significant value, leading me to believe the Thunder definitely overcomplicated things with this situation for themselves in their endless pursuit of more picks. Next up, we have the Phoenix Suns, and honestly, they don't really have a true L this offseason, so by default, I kind of have to say that it's giving Chris Paul a long-term contract at 36 years old. Now, maintaining Chris Paul is obviously a great move for them, after he helped get them to the NBA Finals, but it's hard not to be concerned about paying $120 million to a 36-year-old. Only the first 2 years of the contract are fully guaranteed though, so it isn't even all that bad at all. But because of how well they did otherwise this summer, this is the selection basically by default. Next up is the Portland Trail Blazers, and their biggest L this summer was choosing to run it back with their team that they have set in place, despite Damian Lillard making it very clear that he wanted improvement. This was the first time ever that Damian Lillard even hinted at being unhappy with the Blazers, and instead of showing some urgency, the team decided to run things back in a similar team that just got eliminated in the first round, saying that that's apparently enough. Lillard could very well eventually request a trade if they start the season slowly, and that would be disastrous for them. Up next is the Sacramento Kings, and their biggest L of the offseason is a repeat of a previous selection, but it's their simple lack of activity. The Kings are not a team set up for success right now, so going into the offseason, everyone anticipated some moves to be made on their part. Buddy Hield and Marvin Bagley were 2 names in particular that were supposedly on the trade block, but now there seems to be no momentum on any deals involving them where they would be shipped out, and now the team is in a weird spot as a result of it. Up next is the San Antonio Spurs, and their biggest L of the offseason is their lottery pick in the draft. Now, Josh Primo, who they selected, does absolutely have upside as an 18-year-old, but he wasn't on anybody's radar until the end of the first round, and the Spurs used a lottery pick on him. There was better talent available at that spot, and they had arguably the biggest reach of the night in the draft. And finally, the last team in the West up is the Utah Jazz, and their biggest L of the offseason is wasting a first-round pick in order to get rid of Derek Favors. The Jazz basically did a salary dump when they sent Favors to the Oklahoma City Thunder, and in order to do so, they had to attach a first-round pick to him in the deal. First-round picks are valuable assets, so to throw one away for basically nothing in return is not ideal at all, and sticks out as the easy choice for them on this topic. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what you think was the worst move of the offseason for these teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.